And for me personally, it's the most exciting week. It's going to be also the most technical week of part one, and we're going to talk about aggregates. At some point in my ceramic career, I started asking weird questions. For some reason, I wanted to find something very unique and very interesting and apply that to my texture. Once I remember I asked in one of the Facebook groups if they ever crushed fired bisque piece and added it as grog or applied it to the surface. And I got a very snobby and negative response saying something like, "Oh, why would you possibly do that?" And so in this lecture, I'll explain why you would possibly do that and what's the reason behind it and how for your own artistic expression and exploration you can use those materials. I asked myself, oh, what happens if I fire a piece of wire in a kiln or a rock, or if I dump my piece of paper into the slit and fire it, what would happen to it? In this lecture, I'm going to talk about a lot of different experimental techniques that could potentially influence your textures. What can be considered an aggregate or an additive? It could be so many different things, apparently. Apparently, you can add literally anything to your clay body. Of course, some of the things they're gonna destroy your piece, they're gonna break apart, they're gonna burn away. There's really a wide range of opportunities of what you could do with various materials and how you can add it to that ceramic piece. First of all, it could be various clay bodies. And by clay bodies, I mean commercial clay bodies in a specific condition. So it could be greenware, bisqueware, it could be already glazed ware, it could be fired clay, or colored clay as well. And again, colored bisqueware, colored greenware, etc. It could be wild clays and dirt. It could be rocks, bricks, organic materials that would burn away in a kiln. It could be various metal items, including wire and metal shavings, glass, wood ash, glaze, and different slip leftovers. There's so much that you can add to your ceramic pieces into your clay body or on top to create an interesting texture. For example, you can see one of the artists that I really enjoyed looking at, Kathleen Standing. She wrote a whole book on additives into ceramics, and it's a really cool book. I'm gonna attach the link to the book at the end of the week where I'm gonna post all the additional materials. But this is one of the examples of her piece where she added various organic additions, stains, oxides for color, but you can see those little burned out holes. This comes from organic materials. While you're listening to this lecture, I would highly recommend thinking which ones are applicable to you and to your studio, because a lot of the materials that I'm going to be discussing are hard to fire in a regular community studio kiln. However, if you do it in small quantities, it's probably going to be okay. So remember, the first ever week, we do need to test. And this week in particular, that's a perfect place to apply this rule. Test first. Whatever you do, test first in tiny quantities in a very safe environment. Those things and those aggregates that we're going to be talking about, they could be added to a lot of various places. You could add it directly to clay body. You could put it on surface. You could put it into the glazes as well. We're mostly going to be talking about adding them into the surface. However, you could add them to the clay bodies too. It is a little bit more restrictive. There is a lot fewer things that actually work inside the clay body without destroying the piece and making it collapse. However, it is also possible, and I'll be mentioning which ones worked for me, which ones didn't, which ones it is better to avoid, or if you use it, just use it with caution and know that, oh, this material is a little bit problematic. So it's not like you can't use them, it's just there are certain consequences and precautions that you have to take prior to using it on the actual piece to avoid various health and safety concerns and to avoid your piece being broken. Why would you possibly add anything to your clay? That's because you're here to learn how to create beautiful textures. That's the first and the best reason. Really, I feel like slips is a really amazing tool. However, slips plus additives is what creates texture, because texture is kind of above the surface. You have to create it somehow. And I think adding things to the surface, it just kind of makes logical sense, I hope. In addition to beautiful, beautiful textures and surfaces that you can create, a lot of the materials that I'm going to be talking about are local materials belonging to a specific place. Because a lot of us live in different countries, and therefore the materials that we have access to are different. Various clay bodies, raw materials, aggregates that we can buy in the ceramic supply stores. I will mention some of the commercial materials. You might just find something similar in your store and in your specific location. The local materials as well will differ, and depending on where you live, there are various things to watch out for, and I'm going to be talking about that. Because the materials are local and they belong to a place, the results that you're going to get could have this beautiful characteristics of being site-specific. So they belong to a specific site, and you might potentially have a personal connection to the materials, which you could add to the piece as well. In addition to that, sustainability is another thing that I am personally interested in. If the materials are local, that means that you avoid this huge chain of shipping and global exchange that is very energy consuming and not very good for the environment. Aside from that, by using various materials and especially aggregates into the clay body, you could decrease the shrinkage. You could improve the strength of the clay body. That could be very beneficial if you're working with larger sculptures and forms. Jillian is one of the examples of the artists who began to put a lot of various materials into our clay bodies. So it might even be considered multimedia because there's so much wire and so much other stuff going on. But it is an interesting question. Where does the ceramic stop and where do other materials begin if you're using something else in addition to clay? And I don't know if you want to get that experimental. However, there's a really big range of things you can possibly do with those materials, from very subtle to very, very artistic and experimental. All of this requires a big lecture on health and safety, which is what we're heading to right now.